See that really, if we can collect and fund that budget, then we are recovering. But the people from whom we are collecting this tax and recovering the money are people who are struggling to recover and come up. And so that report, which you saw about the levels of poverty, speaks a lot for itself. This morning or yesterday, I sent a tweet. I'm a farmer. There has been a lot of rain, and ordinarily, you'd have expected that the people of Uganda, because of the excessive rain, are going to have a lot of harvest. I went to my garden of maize, I have about 100 acres, which I had planted. More than half of about 3/4 got flooded. And I'm going to only harvest about 1/4 of the entire 100 acres. So I may not even recover the amount of money that I put in for buying the seed. So, whereas the rains have been a lot, but the excessive rains are going to affect the yield and food production. When you move to many areas where people are farmers. So when productivity gets affected, people will fail to get what take the markets to sell. And that will exacerbate the poverty levels of the people of Uganda. Even that position which has been reported on, if nothing is done, or if the rains not revert to normal, so that people can go back to the second season and become productive enough, that could be a very big problem. So, those figures are indicative of that. But as we look to what the president is going to say, I've watched many democracies, especially the developed democracies. There is usually a tendency of leakage, a tendency of leakage of what is likely, so that by the time the president comes to address it, but that's not very common in Africa. That's not very common in Africa. But ordinarily we can look at what has been happening and perhaps guess. During the last State of the Nation address, there are many areas which people expected the president to talk about. But when he came, he gave a lot of emphasis to household income. And to him, and rightly so, in my constituency, I was a member of parliament for 20 years. And there are so many things that I did from which the people, local communities should be benefiting. And I've mentioned it here before, that we did electricity, we did what? But when you got the population, many of them are stealing the electricity. They wait at night to go and tap and use the electricity because they cannot afford it. And this is not only in Butaleja. This is what has forced the government to come up with a program of enhancing free connections so that people can have access and perhaps be able to pay the bills. That shows you that in a number of people, perhaps the situation may not be as good as it should have been. But the president's emphasis, I still believe, it's an area he may want to talk about, because just recently, Paul, I think we're with you in Chisozi, when the president took the cabinet, some members of the Central Executive Committee and the NRM Secretary, to go and show them the experiments he has done in Gomba and Kisozi about household income with the 4-acre model and what people are doing. In the developed country, when they talk about the economy, they talk about effective demand. According to the old economics, they would even give free money to the population in order to create demand for people to support the transactions within the communities or within the commercial area. In Uganda, we may not do that, but the president has supported the program of enhancing or giving the people money in order to enhance productivity through PDM, through Emioga, so that people can move from the traditional methods of production and they come to the income economy, where people can increase their purchasing power.
Honorable, let me stay with you. When you talk about the 4-acre model, and I really followed, especially when you were in Chisozi, with the land fragmentation, especially you've touched his last State of the Nation's address. He had 17 points. One of those was land fragmentation. With the population growth and the numbers that UBOS is giving us, 10.2 by the time they go to 85%. How is this practical, and how long are you going to still use COVID as an excuse for economic growth?
You see, COVID is a reality. It isn't an excuse. Because it happened, the economy was locked down, and we must revamp the areas that did not come up. There are people who lost their enterprise. People lost schools and properties which they had put in the bank. A person who had mortgaged his school and could not recover because he was not collecting fees, that person may never come up to stand again. So it's not an excuse, but it's a reality that occurred. And we are going to live with it, and people must realize that in order to help the individuals, the businesses, and the corporations to recover, what is it that we must do? Is it through UDB? Is it through other financial intermediation that Parliament may find money to do? Or is it going to be through increased and enhanced agricultural production? So COVID is a real problem. It hit the service industry. There are people who lost their hotels because there are no guests. They had loans to service, yet they didn't have income, and those were problems. So we may overcome over time, but it will take some time for us to do that.
Thank you very much. Honorable Lydia, let me come to you. Why should the country be optimistic with tomorrow's State of the Nation's address?
I did not what Honorable Dombo had. Apart from the loss of institutions and the lockdown of the economy, we lost people. You know, you can lose one manufacturer or one enterprising people and the whole chain. We lost very enterprising and important people of the country, and that also impacted on the growth and the chain of production. Absolutely. And the chain, because growing human capital takes years. If you lose one person, you know the impact it has, not only at the family, but the whole sector of a chain of people. But he already made that point. Tomorrow's State of the Nation address is an accountability tool, because we are running a manifesto implementation since 2021 when we won elections as the NRM. And therefore, it's cumulative and progressive. Tomorrow is like the third year running, because we're now coming towards the end of the third year, entering to the fourth year. And the president, who is also the head of state, is going to, our torchbearer, is going to give an accountability to the country on what we have so far done that we promised the country, and deliberately, also intentionally talking about where we have not been able to achieve, and maybe should be also give reasons why we have not yet reached the targets that we wanted to reach, and maybe some of the reasons will be given tomorrow. Maybe the anticipated growth that we have not yet achieved, and that is also laudable. So we are now tracking the manifesto. It's really a monitoring and evaluation tool to say, you gave us mandate, we promised this and that. There is a manifesto out there, it's a public document, aligned to the National Development Plan 3, which is now getting 2 to 4. You know, remember Vision 2040. So we are trying to track the country and see how much progress we are making. Remember, also the social indicators are out there. We have just had the census. The challenges notwithstanding, shall have some indicative figures of how the country stands from the different demographic indices of our country, and we're able to use that to now tackle the obstacles and the challenges ahead. Tomorrow's ideally that tomorrow's presentation should be a cumulative document or a flash or a reflection of what's happening in the different sectors, but in a summary form, on like the bird's view of how Uganda looks like as of tomorrow. So we hope that I want to invite Ugandans to listen to it, and thereafter we can be able to have the different angles to our expectations and what we see.
And Honorable, just sticking to you, you hinted on the manifesto. Last year the performance was about 22%. This year we're here on this panel. It was 37%. So what achievements are you talking about?
It is a progress. It's a progressive document. It's not just an achievement. You cannot talk about and say that's celebrating achievement despite the challenges that we have. We won the election in 2021 in the middle of COVID. Remember, we did not even go out to run campaigns. These were closed campaigns, and therefore, and everything runs around the economy of the country. That's why the campaign is squarely on household incomes. It is easier to lose something, but reviving and growing, it takes time. And we are honest about what we are doing because we carry on where we are coming from. Just see the weather now, the issues of climate change. You've done a road in billions or trillions of shillings, and then tomorrow the bridge has been washed away. Not because it was poor workmanship, but because the weather or the climate change has caused the floods and water. And that's a very big expenditure. Let's Paul tell you about the cost of the budget of infrastructure today and how many bridges are standing. Today they have finished, they launched a bridge, they were launching a road, Namagumba and Google road construction. But before you know what, when floods come or when mudslides come, that will be just washed away like. So you may look at percentages, but let's also do with the reality. What takes us back is very, very important. And we are now dealing with the reality of the country, and tomorrow should be a clear snapshot of what does Uganda look like, where have we moved steps, what are the challenges, and what are the new emerging interventions. Parish development model is a new intervention to look at the poverty levels. We are talking about 39%, we came to 88%, now today we are hearing another percentage. And for us who serve women, every time there is that type of poverty statistics, we zoom in our cameras, Professor Sarah will tell you, and look at, of these, how many are women and how many are men. Because for every indices, of course, women score poorly, and that's where our work comes in terms of the gender lens, to ensure that the campaign is up there and that the intervention are gender lensed. Yeah.
And before I give an opportunity to Honorable Dombo, you spoke about infrastructure. Fortunately, both Honorable Mara and I were in Gulu this weekend, and that bridge has been there for more than 50 years. We understand the tenure of a road.
Which bridge? Karuma?
Karuma.
Yes.
If we're giving an example like that,
yes,
it seems government is shocked at how dilapidated the infrastructure in this country is. 21,000 kilometers, 6,000 paved. Really, is this return on value for taxpayers' money? What achievements have we had? Because that's all Ugandans want to hear tomorrow. What achievements have we done between 2023 and 2024? Honorable Lydia.
The infrastructure projects are there on paper, and some of them are ongoing. Others, they have serious issues of infrastructure, of contracts, procurement processes, and then there are huge budgets around them. But I think that it is work in progress, because maybe some of the infrastructure projects in Uganda were very ambitious. And again, my colleagues can talk about it, because you are looking at electricity, the generation of electricity is huge money. You're talking about road infrastructure, you're talking about bridges, you're talking about oil and gas. The oil and gas sector takes the big chunk of our money. All that's infrastructure development. Have you been to Hoima? This is a new game plan altogether. What they call them oil roads. They are tourist roads. There's an airport coming up there. All these are huge, huge projects, but all the money is borrowed, and it's in trillions of money.
And we'll come to
so when you're looking at percentages, I would like us to compare. Yes, there are percentages out there. That's a macro outlook, but the rate on the ground, there's work going on. What we need to hear and do is maybe M&E, serious monitoring and evaluation, the value for money, but also durability and sustainability of the infrastructure, because it makes no difference building a road today and tomorrow you are told that it's no more. Either there are potholes, or it has been washed away, or there was no value for money. That's a debate for another day.
Thank you. Honorable Dombo, a comment before I come to Dr. Sarah.
I just wanted you remember not long ago, we were here with the director from the Manifesto implementation. And they are the ones who did that study, which showed that percentage. I wouldn't dispute them at the time we were here during the show. But when we went back, and I discovered that because the specific Manifesto implementation is done by the government, through the government ministries, agencies, and departments, who are funded directly to implement what is reflected in the manifesto. First and foremost, that report was disputed in cabinet by the same people who implement. When they came up with the statistics that had been done, you know, the people who did the study in the manifesto under the office of the president, I think, they would take, say, construction of a building. How many days would it take? Answer 100. How many days have passed? This, how far have we gone?
So the tool.
But without knowing that construction of a building, the foundation, takes a little bit more time. And once you finish the foundation, the remaining part runs faster. So that report has been disputed. They have even put up a cabinet
an internal report.
They have put up a subcommittee, cabinet subcommittee, headed by the Prime Minister, to ask her. The ministers are saying, when you look at the roads that have been mentioned in the manifesto, a number of them have been completed. And when you say 37%, at what level do you consider those roads? So we may have to come back here again in future, or post the Prime Minister, who is responsible for the implementation of government programs, and who is reporting at cabinet level, in order to find out how do you reconcile the research that was done by the manifesto implementation and the implementation of the manifesto by the agencies of government. But we are not doing badly, and I'm very sure this should be able to satisfy the population, but also to give us ground to explain so that they can give us more votes in the coming election.
So we might end up with like 70%.
Dr. Sarah, let me come to you. This evening I was walking and I asked a few Ugandans who were around here. And I asked them, what do you expect tomorrow? One of them told me, I expect to hear in 1986 this is what happened, and today this is what happened.
And they were true.
And for me, the biggest challenge is, has the State of the Nation's address become a ritual, and why? Because the challenge is, it seems like it's regurgitating some of the things that happen. Why is this happening?
You see, the State of Nation address should be an annual accountability of what the government has done to the citizens, because it's every year. It's a constitutional obligation for the executive to account to the citizens under the social contract. What is it that they've attained in that year? Before you asked me, Honorable Dombo, really, was explaining the confusion around the manifesto. And for me, that's the actual state of the nation. The actual state of the nation today is that agencies of government do not speak to each other. You have the office of the president now being dismissed as a research entity, because the manifesto department is under office of the president. It is not an entity outside the cabinet. It's under a ministry, and moreover, the most important ministry, office of the president. So office of the president does a report, and now cabinet says, no, they are misleading, and that shows you a situation where a center cannot hold. I was, when Honorable Dombo started explaining, I was hoping that maybe they subjected the process to an external evaluation. Because in examination, you have internal examiners, you have an external examiner, normally an external examiner under marks. Because the internal examiners are marking because they are the teachers, they are the lecturers. An outsider usually gives a lower score. It's in rare circumstances for an outsider to give a higher score than an internal examiner. But the internal examiners of the manifesto are in disarray. They can't agree with each other. So what would happen if an external examiner came in to evaluate the performance of the manifesto? So the State of the Nation address is in confusion. Why is it that citizens call it a ritual? Of course, the opening statements, you're sure that there are two words you can't miss in any State of the Nation address for 38 years, 1986, and the virtuosi. I don't think you can miss those two. So and so many other choruses, you know, when we came. So the state of the nation that should be an annual accountability by the executive to the people, to the citizens, becomes an accountability of 38 years. And most of the paragraphs will be repetitive, that you cannot rule it out. That's why there is no excitement. So what are the issues facing citizens in 1 year since the last State of Nation address? So the ideal situation would be the president made promises in 2023 during the State of Nation address. The first part should be an accountability of those promises. What has been achieved? What is work in progress? What has failed? The citizens should know. Then you come in and state the reasons why you performed the way you did in the last year. And make new promises and strategies to take the year ahead. But we go around in corners. So what are the issues affecting citizens? One of the biggest achievements of NRM over time has been security, like a constant security. But as we talk today, we have Bijambias taking over the city. We have gangs at every corner. We have police, which is supposed to keep law and order, instead warning citizens, this is a dark spot, don't pass here, don't pass there. Instead of them going in those so-called dark spots and pacifying these spaces to make them secure for the people. So among the issues we expect the president to tell us, why is it that Kampala city has been taken over by gangs? And how safe are the citizens? Or what are the measures for securing the citizens? The second issue would be to look at the external security issues, or whether we are doing well and what we need to do to keep doing well. But the internal security is at stake. Personally, I could not make my ritual travel to Namgongo in view of these gangs at night. Yeah, because usually I go to Namgongo, I live like at 4. Every time you check WhatsApp, neighboring WhatsApp groups at 4, a home is being attacked, whatever, people are not secure. And this is Kampala Metropolitan that we are talking about. People are being, attacked in broad daylight in Kampala. I saw, a security roundup ahead of matters in Namgongo. And then you see a report, 126 people have been picked. It is good they were picked. But how did they grow to that number? That you have a gang of 124 in Charwaja, one place just around Matters Fry. So the state of security needs to be on top of the agenda. The other issues, of course, it's the security. The report says poverty is growing. We have a situation where we have increasing poverty. I know we shall come to the economy, but just as a preamble, you have increasing poverty. You have reducing private sector or a weaker private sector, data coming from URA. You have a growing budget. We have a member of the budget committee. We have growing debt. And we have shrinking revenues. So what is it that we are doing in this zigzag? And increasing income inequalities. So increasing income inequalities, increasing poverty, weaker private sector, shrinking revenues, and a growing budget and a growing debt.
Dr. Sarah, just a follow-up question. A statement came out by the Right Honorable Joel Senyonyi about the boycott by opposition, not to attend both the State of the Nation and also not to attend the budget reading there. When you see this from Forum for Democratic Change to now National Unity Platform, opposition refusing to attend the State of the Nation's address, and they give 2 key reasons. One is corruption, the other is lack of accountability. Is this valid, especially that they're supposed to be representing the people, to bring these questions to the executive? Is their boycott valid?
I saw the statement of the leader of opposition, and he said it's a ritual. Everybody knows what will take place.
He actually said he has a response.
Yes, already. You also said you met a citizen who says they know what will be there. So there is no excitement generally about the State of Nation address. Because you say a view of the leader of opposition, but a view of an ordinary citizen. And I've been seeing views of ordinary citizens like there is no excitement about the State of Nation address. You have a situation, I know I mentioned the other gloomy, depressing economic figures, but amidst this, we have just been seeing the traders, in protesting, increasing taxes. And I know Parliament went ahead, although with the reduction here and there, but they enacted the same taxes. Some of them, there was a slight reduction. But still, there is new taxes coming up. So you have a situation where traders walked away from the president in Kororo. Walked away from that meeting, unsatisfied. You have the traders who were at Kororo at the fulcrum of our money economy, Chukubo. 22 billion generated from Chukubo every day. The days they are on a shutdown, you have a revenue loss of 2 billion as a country. You have a situation where, I don't know the new figures from IGG, but the last 2 years, the IGG said we lose 10 trillion to corruption every year. So just look at simple figures of our state of the nation. Projected revenue, 31.2 trillion. Money going into debt servicing is 34 trillion. So what we generate as a citizenry cannot pay debt. We are short of 2 trillion just to pay debt from all our revenues. Then you lose 10 trillion to corruption. And you make a budget of 72 trillion. Does that seem like a serious country?
Thank you, Doctor. Let me bring in Honorable Mara. You sit on the Budget and Finance Committees there. The biggest concern, especially when I remember some of the things the President said, the tax base at 13.7, hopefully growing it to 18%, and then you see a 72 trillion budget being put before the people. What's the state of our economy? What's the reality of the economy when you move around this city and this country?
Thank you very much.
And what should the President be saying about this economy?
Thank you very much, Timothy. You're asking a very difficult question. But nonetheless, I would just want to pick it up from my colleague, Honorable Dombo, where he ended it. It is absolutely true that we experienced a very disastrous COVID situation for 2 years. And that is almost 2020, 2021. We started leveling up in 2022, end of 2022. So financial year 2022, 2023, the economy started to reboot, really. And 2023, 2024, there is more optimism in terms of our recovery efforts. Somebody actually joked and said, World Bank and IMF are not now very good friends, in quotes, but they have provided a very promising outlook about the performance of Uganda's economy in relations to the region and the world, with the GDP projected at 6.5 to 7% growth per annum. So I remain optimistic that regardless of the COVID situation where we had a very difficult, wasted 2 years, the efforts have been made to really making sure that we recover. Of course, like this financial year, our budget is 52.7 trillion. We don't know how much it has been disbursed now in terms of budget performance. But if you look, there were a number of key sectors that money were provided for. And Honorable Dombo was talking about, construction of certain key infrastructures for the country, which is going on in the countryside there, contributing towards our development efforts. For the last 2 consecutive years, because remember, the grassroots economics is very important. That is where tires hit the road. We provided 1.1 trillion, actually 1.3 if you consider the administrative work aspect of it, in the financial year 2022-2023. We provided similar amount 2023-2024. So over 2-point-something trillion money has been provided to the local person, the wananchi, where effectively the president was looking at, if you add Myoga and PDM, the total sum is much higher. That is where production is supposed to happen, to contribute towards the growth of the economy. If you look at the 4 pillars the president has been talking about, is industrialization, modernization of agriculture, commercialization of agriculture, ICT and services. So if you look at agriculture, a lot of money has actually gone there. We have bought tractors, many tractors, and given them out to commercial farmers and also to communities to actually boost production. The key issue here is, can we boost production? Can we increase the household income? I believe is something that the president will talk about tomorrow, relating to the growth of household income and production in the agricultural sector. I have heard my colleague Honorable Tombo talking about the problems of weather, because rain has been much, but I think if
Honorable, allow me to jump in there and
yes.
stay to PDM.
Yes.
Different stories have been done here at UBC.
Yes.
Especially in Kampala.
Yeah.
Money is given to a trader, puts a stall to make chips on the side of the road. KCC comes and sweeps it away. The contradiction between giving money for PDM,
yeah.
another entity from government still refusing this to happen. How is this contradiction going to be resolved?
Kampala has a capital city, is a totally different scenario, because Kampala is about trading. And if the KCC is still picking that from the poor people, and I think the president even warned them that don't tax these people who are selling tomatoes on the roadside. That is more administrative, really. And I don't think you can generalize that one across the country. So I think KCC, if they're hearing us, I think they need to allow our people to begin to make money so that they can contribute towards the tax base. Timothy, if you look at also, as an economist, there is we will never go away without talking about the macroeconomic indices. If you compare our macroeconomic environment with the region and the world, Uganda has performed excellent. For example, inflation. Remember at COVID, our inflation went up to 10.5. As we speak now, inflation in this country is below 3%. And the indicative figure, which has been put by Minister of Finance, is still 5%. We are performing far below a figure of 5%. We are at 3 and below. If you look at the exchange rate, has remained very stable at 3.7, 3.8, within that range. What that means, actually, Timothy and the viewers, is that if you control inflation, you basically are increasing the aggregate demand from the people there. Because even if you are earning a constant amount of money, your purchasing power parity actually is energized. But the moment inflation goes up, all this money will become nothing. The same amount of money will buy. So I believe that the president will talk about this tomorrow to say we have, in a very skillful way, managed to have a macroeconomic stability in the country, which has increased the effective demand, has made sure the little money that our people have, we can still at least buy something, even if you're earning a certain level of income. So I think that is something that we have achieved, which is not very common across the country, in other countries, in the region. And so we tend to beat ourselves so hard. You walk across Kenya and you'll see the situation is totally different. So for me, the outlook about the economy is that we have really rebooted it. We have given priorities in certain key sectors of growth. What is important is that for the responsible MDAs and ministries to execute on those strategies.
Honorable, just two things before I come to Professor. One is today the acting governor has said the CBR is not going to move from 10.25%. The taxes that you passed as parliament put an increment on the taxpayer to be able to fork out more money to pay for fuel. This fuel, both diesel and fuel, are drivers to this economy. When you look at these two and then you say the economy is it a real reflection of what is really happening?
I think the governor has maintained the CBR at that particular rate because he's aware that the government is going to come into the money market and the bond markets to borrow. If you look at our budget, that's 72 trillion. About 19 trillion will basically be borrowed from domestic. And so, therefore, the rate cannot come lower when actually government is going to come into the market. So the banks are going to be very, very happy to really go into these non-risk-weighted assets, which are treasury bonds and bills, and give that money to government. So they are not going to give it on the cheap. So definitely the rates will be relatively higher. So the CBR is maintained at that rate because of the outlook where the governor is looking at the thing and said government will come into the market to borrow money. And so the banks are looking at to cash on it. So those bond markets and bills markets rates are not going to be much lower. So with the treasury bill at that rate is actually an outlook looking at what is going to happen next. The little money we put on fuel, actually 100 shillings. Prices have increased, Timothy and the viewers outside there, over the years, the last 5 years, the last 7 years, from 3 something now to 5 something per liter of diesel or petrol without a single tax increment. So the prices have been going without increases in taxes. So the 100 shillings we have added is not going to cause tremendous increase in prices. That is our belief. And if you look at that budget, as Dr. Sarah said correctly, in this budget, UR is projected to only collect 31 trillion, and our budget is 72. Remember, the rest must be borrowed domestically, mainly, and externally. So for how long are we going to, as Ugandans, going to rely on foreigners to fund our budget? And if you look at, again, within the region, we are actually the lowest at a tax to GDP ratio of now touching 14%. Normally it should be 16, 20%. The Rwandans are moving ahead. So Ugandans, what has been happening, there are a big section of people, of Ugandans that have not been paying taxes. Or there has been inefficiency in tax collection. Like you hear the IFRIS that we are talking about. It's basically, IFRIS just exposes you that you have not been remitting this tax. That's what IFRIS does. It is not a new tax. The new tax that we are talking about is only the tax on fuel which we have given, which is basically 100 shillings per liter of diesel or petrol. And so I think the key issue that Ugandans need to hear, we will never make progress with a very low tax base, a tax collection as a percentage of GDP. I am still looking at the wisdom of getting our tax, our budget ceiling at 72 trillion shillings with a tax projection at 31. I am beginning to look at the money of oil coming down, because we have invested billions of dollars in oil infrastructure. And our target was that by September of 2025, we should begin to start getting that oil out. So you're not going to have this budget of 72 trillion shillings sustain over a period of time on borrowing, because as Dr. Sarah said, this next financial year, the budget alone to do the debt repayments plus interest is 34 trillion. And you're only collecting 31. So you now need to go into the market and borrow, regardless of the total taxes that you've collected, you need another 3 trillion to add on to it to pay debt alone. You have not even paid salary and other things. So until we begin as Ugandans to say, this country is ours, everybody must be strong enough and courageous enough to pay a share of taxes. Remember last financial year, I mooted the idea of taxing animals. Everybody was all over me. I'm happy the speaker recently talked about, he said, I have my cows, I sell them and I have a lot of money and I'm not paying a single tax. So we need to broaden the tax base and lessen the tax on the majority. So I'm one of the people that are saying paying taxes are not a bad thing at all. What is important is where these monies are channeled, what we use with them, I think is what is important. Timothy, I think I would agree with Dr. Sarah on the issue which the president needs to comment about regarding economy again, or is on transport infrastructure. We had talked about railways. I remember we even provided a supplementary on the meter gauge railway coming from Malaba to Kampala. They need to show us the status of where that railway is, whether it is functional. We have put money in the next financial year to look at the standard gauge railway. So this accountability that Dr. Sarah talked about is, I think the president needs to crystallize this and say, last year we were supposed to renovate the railway coming from Malaba to Kampala. This is what we have done. Yeah. These are the efforts we have made. We wanted to contribute so many kilometers of roads. This is what we have achieved. Yeah. So those who write some of these things for the president, they need to be very succinct, very specific and purposeful to say, if these are captured, the citizenry will now understand, say, okay, that budget which we utilize in the financial year 2023-2024, these are the outcomes. The one which is very clear is PDM, and we have been on the back of Minister of Finance to make sure, please release the money, let it go to the people. So when that money is released, we know that the aggregate demand has been created at the grassroots level. It doesn't matter who has received it. Some Ugandans somewhere have received this thing. And we now need to see the ripple effect. And we need to study this over a period of time. Money for Emyoga has gone. Money for PDM has gone. Has it changed the lives of our people? Has it improved the household income? And we have all these elected people of Uganda. We are now over 2 million, by the way, from the presidency to the LC1 person down there. We are many. So what are the leaders doing? Because, Honorable Dombo, the president has a model farm in my constituency. Baralege. We are lucky to have Baralege. Are we as leaders emulated that and collected our people to show them, to bring them on the demonstration farm and say, please go and replicate this? Because now the president can't take all of us all the time to go and show us, and the leaders are not replicating what is being done. So we need to find mechanisms of ensuring that what has been laid up from above gets crystallized and people understand it, so that the impact on our people is really properly understood.
Thank you, Honorable. Let me come to Professor. Professor, tomorrow, about 2 p.m. onwards there, the President will be speaking. How can he strike the chord of the reality of the plight of Ugandans tomorrow?
Thank you very much.
I think many times the President has tried to strike that chord by explaining what actually is happening and advising what actually should happen. My only challenge is maybe, I don't know how we understand the state of the nation, and maybe the politicians here will help us. Of course, they've said it is, they've told us that it's an accountability mechanism. But my question has always been, and then so what, okay? Because you find whenever we've had the state of the nation, there are some aspects where the president is clear that these are the priorities in this sector, government is going to do the following. And my question is, who then picks it up and does the following? And how is what progress is in those areas captured? That's why so that we don't have discrepancies on the performance on the NRM manifesto, for example. Then you have those sections where he explains what is happening and what should not be happening. Who picks that up and takes? And why this is important is you see the same things recurring in the different state of the nation addresses. The issue of corruption, he has always talked about corruption and how corruption is like stealing from ourselves and how that should stop, okay? The other thing he has always talked about is land fragmentation. And of course, he has always promoted the 4-acre model, but there are parts of this country where even 4-acre model is a luxury. People have half an acre, people have a quarter. If you go like to the Elgon zone, that one is again its own story. And of course, he has always preached inheritance shares. So, but then who is supposed to pick this up and take it further? Of course, the other thing he's going to speak about is agro-industrialization. Industrial parks, something has been done, because you move and you see
industrial park. So for me, the question is, when the State of the Nation address is given and such great analysis is made by the President in terms of priorities, in terms of what has gone bad, in terms of what should not be, then what? I'll just give a simple example and which ties in with this. Every State of the Nation address has talked, in which the environment has been captured and addressed, or the climate. They have talked about growing rice in wetlands, in Bukedi. Okay? And the President has been clear that even those areas remain poor. So implying that the growing of rice in the wetlands, one, is not transforming the lives of the people doing that, in addition to destroying the environment. So we are actually suffering twice. We think we are making money, but that money is not substantial enough to transform us from poverty, and yet we are destroying the environment. But he keeps saying this in every State of the Nation address. So my question has always been, so those in charge of the environment, are they hearing? Are they listening? And what should happen? Of course, that tells us that in spite of PDM, rural poverty remains a challenge. And rural poverty will remain a challenge because we have a country which is largely rural. The population growth rate is very high. And the services that would have addressed this population are not moving in tandem with the population growth. Countries reach that stage in time. Okay? And so we are going to continue having these things where, in spite of the investments, poverty continues. So now we have to know how we analyze that, whereby whether you're going to put in more trillions or more billions, if the population growth is outpacing what you're putting in, you'll continue looking like you're a non-performer or you're underperforming. So there is that thing we have to know. But where that's not a problem, how do we deal with the issues the President addresses in every State of the Nation address as a problem? I know he has said, especially on infrastructure, he makes it clear, our priority this year, we are going to construct this road, we are going to do that. When it comes to economic transformation, we are going to give people money for circles and the rest. But is someone tracking to know the, okay, you may say it is new, okay, PDM is new, but Emyoga is a little bit older. Is someone tracking to see the impact of these things on the ground, so that we are advised on whether we continue with that mode of giving money in people's pockets or putting in place communal things from which everyone will benefit from, but also spark growth? Things like maybe grinding mills, solar powers, small solar irrigation schemes, those have always featured in the State of the Nation address. And this goes back to where we started from, and Dr. Sarah said that's the actual State of the Nation address, because people don't seem to be sharing. I see it as a problem of either not sharing information or not having a central point where the information from the different sectors then makes its way. And this should be a challenge taken up by the NRM, because it's the party in government. So while we are doing this in the Ministry of Water, we are doing this in the Ministry of Health, we are doing this in the Ministry of Education, those who are implementing the manifesto needs to find out how this is coming together, because it's they are the ones well placed at that point to bring information together to see how we are performing on this manifesto, whether 5 years or 10 years. I think it's 5 years, yeah. Every year, 5 years, we have a different manifesto. But if we don't have that central pool of having information, we shall continue debating on whether we are overperforming, underperforming, or not performing at all. And that's why I've always said here that I'm excited with the parish-based management information system. The only challenge will be the challenge of implementation. Because if that was in place, then it would help us do data gathering at the last mile. The women she's talking about, the youth that they're talking about, what exactly is happening in these places, the marginalized, the poor, because we all know the taxpayers are in Kampala, Wakiso areas. The rest of the other areas, there's not much tax, but a lot of the tax also has to go there because they require services. So what exactly is happening? Because if you don't have data, you're going to have a problem. But for me, the fundamental question is, who is charged with implementing what is coming out of the State of the Nation? Said differently, what is the purpose of the State of the Nation address beyond us hearing what has been done? I think, in my view, it should be for the different sector leads to say, okay, they mentioned this, let me go with it, do something about it, and report back. But if it is just a story where people tune in and then people hear and then people make caricatures out of it, becomes really disservice. I think as people, we should take the state of the nation seriously. Those mandated with the responsibility to implement should do their bit to implement, and the analysts can analyze. Thank you.
So in your view, if you were, before I get to Honorable Mara, if you were to really put this speech together for the president, because there are some pictures he asks for and they're shown, what areas would you be interested in for the public to be able to listen to?
I think the public's not listening to the state of the address has nothing to do with the quality of the state of the address. The public is just in other things. I think those in charge of mobilization need to mobilize people to think that, to know that the state of the nation address is a very important thing. So the previous state of the nation addresses have addressed pertinent issues. And that's why for me, I feel cheated that after the State of the Nation address, this next year's State of the Nation address has the same thing. Either the one writing it is not doing enough research, or those mandated to do something about it are not doing their work. Okay? So the State of the Nation address is addressing a lot of great things, because there's always terrorism, there's always economic transformation, there's always issues about rural poverty, land, climate, crime, all of those things. I don't think we could expand that more, because those are the issues which are pertinent to our society. Of course, last year they also talked about the AHA and the whole fact about self-determination as a people and who we are. They talked about foreign direct investment, youth unemployment, trade. Okay, this time, of course, probably there should be more sensitization of people with regard to tax compliance, because that's also an area where we have suffered a lot of misinformation and disinformation, but maybe it should also go hand in hand with effective utilization of these monies, because if people are going to, if we are going to pay a lot of scrutiny to ensure maximum tax compliance, people would also want to see that their money is doing what it's supposed to do. It does not help when that tax compliance is moving and there are different vibes coming out from other sectors of government. That actually should be monitoring and ensuring that there's effective utilization of these monies. So basically, I think for me, first, and you just need to put the State of the Nation address in perspective. Each State of the Nation address is richer than the one of the previous year. So which means people are paying attention to adding things. So I look forward. Yes, if you look at the one of 2022, it was more brief. The one of 2023 is more detailed with more sections. So I expect the one of 2024 to have more pages and more issues.
To be a booklet.
A comment, Honorable Mara, so that we can take
I just wanted to kind of simplify it, because Professor Salas asked very many questions.
Yes.
So the status of the nation is about giving assurance to the citizens as the head of state about the condition of the country from certain key aspects. Let me say the economy, issue of national security, issue of the environment, or other key areas, and also to project what is going to happen next in the coming year, because you need to give them some confidence, and also accountability of what you've done within that particular 1 year. I give you two examples. I know the mantra for President Museveni is national strategic security, and is what he knows best. And if you look at last year, for us in the northern and eastern Uganda, we had skirmishes coming from the Karamoja sub-region. We've had incursions where ADF caused some problems in Kampala. Now, the president I hosted him in Baralegi, so he invited all of us, the MPs from Karamoja, Langwe, and Acholi, and we had a discussion there. So that was what was happening. For him, he was concerned about insecurity. Now, he dealt with those insecurities. So I believe that tomorrow he's going to give assurance to the country that on matters of national security, we have dealt with any internal skirmishes or even any external aggression. So as a citizen, you be rest assured that there is tranquility and peace. So continue to do your work. One other thing which he talked about last year was about boosting our production, our manufacturing sector, so that we can now supply the region with the goods. These goods may be Kenya, South Sudan. I would expect him to now, tomorrow, talk about the balance of trade. has our balance of trade improved? Because now we have about 5,000 companies that are manufacturing. They went through COVID situation. Are they performing at full capacity? Are we as a country now exporting to our neighbors? What is the position of balance of trade? So I expected the Ministry of Trade, now as you're saying, various MDAs now need to correlate very important aspects, for example, intra-African trade, inter-regional trade, and say, Mr. President, based on the strategy we laid last year and the implementation, our trade basket has improved, and our balance of trade has also improved because of what we did last year. And that should come in the speech for that accountability.
Let me read some
when
some
he
feedback.
does that, the different sectors shouldn't pick lessons and things to implement?
No, that would be because last year he promised we are going to do this. We are going to put a lot of resources here. Now, that is about performance now. He should be able to tell us we have actually performed, we have increased.
Yeah, so when things recur, it means there's a problem with performance.
If things
and that's why we're asking the question.
If things reoccur, then that is something that, and it's a continuous problem. You can never solve all the problems, but you need to show us.
Like rice in Vukedi and production. We are not talking about national security.
Let me get to the feedback that is here because it's a lot.
Yeah.
Good evening, Timothy. Thank you for the show and the discussion today. I am Dominic from Nepak. My submission is that when we are suffering here in Nepak, the teachers' salaries haven't been paid. The deductions were made. Many teachers were not paid for April and May, and for now, some of us have not been paid up to date. The system is not even. We are needed in schools to teach our children, yet we do not have the money. How can you help the teachers in the park to access salaries, April and May? Blessings, okay? Very good concern there. Good evening, I'm watching from Kitugum. Okay, let me read another one that comes through. I expect the President tomorrow to talk about the State of the Nation's address on public debt. This is a very serious and urgent matter, with uttermost attention to the GDP. Servicing debt, it means half of Uganda's wealth is going to servicing foreign debt, while the corrupt officers in the House can grab and embezzle money, public funds to the bottomless pit. How did we arrive here, and have we forgiven our debtors? Patrick from Lira. Finally, one more before we take a break. I expect the President to talk about the 4-acre model, corruption, foreign sanctions only, and I'm hoping to enjoy the rest of the discussion here. Finally, Lydia from Jinja, I've seen your message, and Bwango from Fort Poto. What I expect is the President should inform the nation whether the country is ready to host 2027 AFCON, especially in the Hoima Stadium and Akibo Stadiums. Are not yet constructed. Secondly, the escalating debt, the presidential unfulfilled pledges, which are still pending in different regions, the country. Lastly, let him talk about the effectiveness of the different sanctions on our key figures in the country and what implications it has to us as a country. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back into those areas, especially the economy and the sanctions and the environment. This and more after this break.
National Heroes Day of Uganda takes place on 9th June every year to commemorate the brave people who laid down their lives during the Ugandan Bush War that took place between 1981 and 1986. This year, the 35th Heroes Day will be commemorated under the theme Hail Our Heroes, a secure Uganda is now reality. On Sunday 9th June 2024, all roads will lead to Mpenja Church of Uganda Primary School Playgrounds, Mpenja Sub-County in Gomba District. Join us to witness heroes from different parts of the country receive medals to recognize their contributions to the betterment of Uganda from His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who will be the chief guest on National Heroes Day. All this will be broadcast live on your national broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda.
PDM, changing lives.
Back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. The show still continues even offline. We keep discussing whatever has been happening here. I am joined by Professor Sarah Sali, Honorable Paul Omara, Dr. Sarah Birete, Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, and Honorable Emmanuel Dombo. We're discussing the State of the Nation address tomorrow and preempting what the President will be discussing, especially looking at what he has discussed in the 36th and 37th State of the Nation's address there, and piggybanking on that to be able to discuss some of the issues. A lot of feedback coming through. We'll be reading some of that in a short while. But let me get to Honorable Dombo. You wanted to respond to something before we dig into the economy.
Timothy, thank you very much. During the discussion here, you asked a question about whether this is just a recure or whether it has something meaningful. It has both. The State of the Nation marks the opening of the next session of Parliament.
Yes.
And that is routine and is ritualistic. That every opening of the session of Parliament is going to be opened by the President giving the State of the Nation. Unfortunately, I don't know whether that article of the Constitution needed to be operationalized by an act of Parliament so that you specifically require a president to talk about specific issues. But because the State of the Nation changes, supposing you again come up with an act of Parliament, and then tomorrow you have COVID, which is not anticipated in the budget. Yeah. So I think it gives the president the leverage to deal with issues as they are, because he's the one mandated. He's the executive officer of Uganda. But some people mentioned, I think it was Sarah and Honorable Senyonyi, when he said that he has drafted a reply because he knows what the president is going to say, or that the president is going to talk about 1996.
1986.
1986. I want to tell you, all of us here are Christians, I believe. There has never been a new Lord's Prayer in the church. There has never been a new grace. It is the same Lord's Prayer since time immemorial. And that has never stopped people from going to church and praying to God under the same prayer. Uganda has a history. And when the NRM came to power, it started on a certain date, and there were certain occurrences that give bearing to what the future of the country should be. So, to those people who already anticipate or know, or who can guess what the president may say, they should know that even Christianity, most of the prayers and the creeds that we read happened so many years ago.
Information, my senior.
Yes, sir.
I think the leader of opposition in parliament is being a little bit disingenuous, because you cannot participate through a budget process. They were all with us. We participated together. They contributed towards the budget process. Honorable Semuju, who is the de facto Minister of Finance on that side, made a presentation, a very strong case in Parliament. So democracy, dictates that, the majority will always have their way. So if you are a Democrat, demonstrate it. So I would have expected them to really come to listen to the state of the nation and also at the same time participate in the budget presentation by the president.
But the rules of parliament say that the speaker's decisions are final unless challenged the way the rules provide.
Yeah.
But also there are many things that are not provided for in the rules where the speaker can make a ruling and those rulings become the foundation for future amendment of the rules. I was wondering whether if somebody becomes such disingenuous like you have said, if you decide boycott, should you have a right of reply to something that you formally boycotted and you chose not to participate in? It is something that can be evaluated and found out because Parliament is an honorable place where the president comes as a visitor because it is members of Parliament who are the owners of the home and they invite the president in order to discuss these matters. But we shall leave this to the members of Parliament and the Speaker, how he wishes to handle the matter. But I would encourage our people that if we are going to build the country Uganda, the earlier we realize that we need one another, the better for those people, especially those who crave to lead this country and want to become an example.
Honorable Dombo, sticking with you, and let's jump into some of the gist of what we anticipate tomorrow will be said. When you look at this economy, and I remember the president vividly talking about a Chinese investor that came around and was a few people, scrupulous people got there and corruption happened, and he said he knows them. At what point is there willingness to fight corruption?
Well, one of the things you should know is that corruption is bad. And, but like I said sometime in the past, that fighting something which is sweet for those fighting it and those doing it becomes very difficult. Corruption is like, not immorality, what did I want to say it? Something close to that. You know, adultery is immoral. In some situations, it's even illegal. But you may find that at times it even tempts the priests who preach against it, and they become victims. You begin wondering, how did this happen to a priest who knows better? He even talks with God directly, but he has fallen short because he's a human being and we are weak. You get the corrupt people, you get a magistrate, you get a policeman, so fighting corruption cannot be fought by the will of an individual, but needs collective effort by each one playing his or her part in order for us to fight corruption. And it has really crippled this country. When you get to the decentralized areas and you see what people are doing, there is when the Honorable Gwang was the Minister for Economic Monitoring, he went to a district where they had built a latrine, a toilet, but without a hole down. They just put a slab and put a cover and built a building, and they said this toilet cost over 40 million. When they tried to excavate, it was a slab and there was no hole. Nothing had been excavated. But then you would ask, that district has got a member of parliament, that district has got a woman MP, that district has got a chairman LC5, that district has a district councillor. They should not supervise the toilet. They have roles.
They have roles, this is what we are saying.
They have roles.
There's even a cow.
Because there is a cow who certifies and signs a certificate. An engineer who is paid by government and signs certifying that this toilet has been completed and therefore staff pay.
Maybe he didn't remove the cover.
But he should have supervised the construction. So, I want to tell you, corruption is bad. It has affected this country. It has affected the reputation of government. And you had the president, I had the president the other day when he was in Mgongo, and when he was at the military institution in
National
Jinja,
Defense College.
National Defense College and passing. He promised that he's going to come up strongly and do something stronger in order to fight corruption. But him alone, he will say that as long as the individuals in their respective offices who are supposed to do what they're supposed, if a magistrate, let us begin where the case begins. If people who have seen and they are not willing to come and testify in court, then the magistrate's hand will be tied. If a prosecutor or the CID officer who is going to record the statement gets a bribe and he falsifies the entries in the records, then already, however much the magistrate tries, the problem is going to come. If a magistrate is bent on it being corrupt and he doesn't do his work, it doesn't matter whether the CID officer has done a good job, whether the people have brought the proper evidence and have testified. So, we need the goodwill of government and the institutions of government, but even the people occupying the offices that should fight or help in the fighting corruption, they should do their responsible job. But the leaders too, over 2 million leaders.
Honorable Dombo, and what you're saying is very valid, and we agree with you. But at what point does the talk become the walk? Because the president has said those ones who have stolen, if they're investing here, let them stay. The lifestyle audit has been put before him. He has said go slowly on it. At what point is there political will? At what point do you stop talking and start acting? He said he knew the people that fleeced these Chinese. When we're going to the next State of the Nation's address, we don't know what happened. Where is the walk to this talk?
You know, the president has a dual responsibility of... One time I was talking with Honorable Dandisali when he was still in government. And we were talking about some ministers who had misbehaved. And Honorable Dandisali asked me, said, do you know why the people who had the crimes during the World War, some of them are still being pursued up to now? They were so much engrossed in the system that touching on one could easily crumble the entire system at that time. There are things that you defer, not because you don't want to do it, but doing it at that time may have repercussions and consequences. When you look at South Africa as a country. Bwana who? This man?
Zuma.
Zuma. Zuma was accused of corruption. He was thrown out of government.
He was taken to jail.
The people in his area saw it differently.
They demonstrated.
They demonstrated and they have voted and they split off.
He has even won elections.
Yes,
And his party,
57
the party he
MPs.
supports has won elections and has created problems for the ANC because now it must have
They
a
don't have a
coalition.
majority.
So-
The mistake they made was forgiving him.
So the problem, the challenge you have when you are managing a country which has feelings, has tribal feelings, has got such feelings, is at which speed do you go without being misunderstood and without having ripple effect on the stability of the country? These are challenges. We live with them. But, Timothy, I believe you're a Christian. I don't know whether you are or you are not. But if you go and read the Bible, and you see what Jesus did when they tried to stone a woman who had misbehaved and done immorality, he asked them, he said, if any of you has never done it, be the one to cast the stone. Was Jesus encouraging the people to do it by asking that question? Or was he saying that, are we moral enough ourselves? Can't we treat this woman differently because of the human failures we have as individuals? It depends on how people interpret this. It would also depend on how somebody interprets the statement the president said when he said so at that time.
Let's park that there, but coupled with it, before I come to Honorable Lydia, these sanctions, the UK, the US, Dubai, they give a very tainted, they stain the image of the country. What does that mean for us as a country, especially being that the Speaker of the Parliament is the third in command in this country?
the people have admired is President Museveni, the way he has handled the issue of the sanctions. Because first and foremost, he has invited the institutions of government to find out whether there is credibility in what is being said. The second one, he has approached the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is responsible for playing the diplomacy or the diplomatic issues of the country. Now the issue will be, because when they report to him to answer the questions, we get copies of the letters, but we have so far not gotten the reports either from the ambassador or from the Minister of Foreign Affairs or from the various interactions and correspondences that take place. This is now private, His Excellency the President, who will have to use that information depending on what it says and how he chooses to use it. The President, being the person I have studied over a period of time, he observes the various layers of governance and structure of communication. There may be issues which he may want to bring out during the cabinet meeting. There may be issues which he may choose to bring out during the caucus meeting, or there may be issues that he will want to consider with his peers in the NEC, in the Central Executive Committee of the party, but also there are issues that he raises with the individuals that are concerned, given the status and the positions people hold, but also giving the strength of the issues that have been mentioned therein. So given that the President started an investigation and he has reached a certain level, let us wait for him and find out whether he will choose to say something about it. But listening, if I may go by what he said when he was in Amgongo, he was very emphatic when he said, we shall not be pushed to do things that our martyrs died for. Because the martyrs died for Christianity, and Christianity is very clear about certain issues that are being portrayed. Whether the sanctions are coming because of that or because of any other issues, now that is for the people who are privy to the information and the investigations that have been brought up to tell the state and tell the world what exactly has been found out and how are we going to circumvent it. But finally, sanctions are not good because they are not good for the individual who has been sanctioned, but also they are not good, especially if they may besmirch the name of the country based on information that may not be true. But all that will depend on the findings of the President, on how he chooses to use the information that he finds out, whether he will make it public or whether he may choose to share it with the individuals that are concerned.
Thank you very much. Honorable Lydia, let me come to you, and really grateful that you stressed the environment, and also someone sent a message grateful for you stressing it, and I think they were with you because they have sent some pictures on that effect. The President has always told people to leave the wetlands. The forest cover of this country is one of the biggest concerns. I was in Gulu, Honorable Mara was in Gulu, it was raining. It's hotter in Kampala than it is in Gulu. When you look at wetlands, construction of roads in this country, how important is the environment to the government, especially for posterity?
First of all, I also want to talk about the issue of corruption. And I've had the opportunity to work in the region beyond Uganda.
Yes.
And what has happened in our neighboring countries, even within the EAC, but you can also add this, Ethiopia, the governments have chosen to deal on issues of more using political decisions than legal. I don't know if I get my point. Once there is an issue about corruption on the individual and institution, they will take political decisions against the suspects or the culprits than using the legal arm, because of the scarcity of the resources that they have and the way to secure resources for service delivery. So whoever is given an office there are issues of integrity that is impeccable, not questionable. And that has even changed the face of deployments of nationals. For example, in Kenya, the 2010 Constitution of Kenya has amended. Now, for you to get a certain level of cadre leadership in Kenya, the appointments are public. You are appointed through a public scrutiny.
Hearing.
Hearing, it is televised, so that they tell you, yes, you are a national, yes, very good, you qualify, but the test for integrity, the public must approve. Because Uganda, for example, is not less of a people of integrity. So for me, I want to deviate a bit from Honorable Dombo because of my exposure that the buck ends with the political decision. And the flag bearer, the torch bearer of Uganda's vision is President Museveni. He must be seen to act on corruption in our country, because I think at a personal level, we are bordering now impunity in terms of lack of service delivery to our people, where it stands in the way of diverting resources by people that have been given the opportunity to serve. Ugandan positions are very few. We have very educated people. If you have been given a chance to be appointed in this, and most of the positions are actually cleared by the presidency, from the level of director, commissioner, PS, even the political appointments, most of them go through the vetting presidential processes. So therefore, for me tomorrow, I would, even if the president is going to talk about his disingenuous about corruption and his final decision to call against corruption, we want to see action. And if I had the chance to talk to him, because SEC has not sat before the nation address in the last few weeks, but I would wish him to take action, because I think he has enough evidence to show that there are Ugandans who have not delivered to the expectations of the people on the ticket of integrity of national resources for service delivery. And for me, I think that we've spoken enough. We want to see action. And for me, the action should not be through reports, IGG. I want to see more political decisions on this than the legal and the administrative and warnings. Because we have small resources and the service delivery is being stood in the way because of impunity. Our corruption levels in Uganda are bordering impunity. Somebody is able to take a full line of the budget of the financial year, and nothing happens to them.
Honorable, you also have ministers who leave the dog in court and come and sit in cabinet.
So for me, if you ask me, in the national address tomorrow, even if it does not talk about corruption, I would be happy. But after that, we would want to see action. Because I think talking has been enough. Yeah, there has been enough talk. I think now people want to see, including myself, I want to see action. Because in the ESC, I think there's been action. At least I can speak for Kenya. I can speak for, I was in Tanzania when, since the late Magufuli took over, and now Madam Suhuru, the government has taken zero, actually negative tolerance to integrity issues on office bearers. If you go to the Revenue Authority in Tanzania, if you go to their authorities at the sea authorities, because they have a very big docking space for those authorities, you cannot take 2-3 years without meeting the targets. They come and search your house. They check your wealth. If it is not aligned to what your revenue, your earnings are, you go. And that's not happening in our country. Not that we hate people holding big positions, but I think that we've not paid enough attention to accountability, and that we've been a bit insensitive to service delivery. We live in the community. I come from Mbale City, and in my country city, there is a referral hospital. You find people sleeping in the corridors. There's not enough oxygen. Like you've heard from NEPAC, teachers are not paid. There is a gap between the quarterly releases and how they end up to service delivery. Somewhere along the wiring of these resources, something right is not happening. And I think because I really work for the NRM, and we are accountable for people even now, because we are running the government's manifesto, we must act on corruption, not only on corruption, but there is a level of impunity that I see. Maybe Paul does not see, maybe Dombo doesn't see. And for me, I think that the people that really are on the signatures of our country, even at the issue of from the top to the last accounting office at the parish development model, they are accountable to our country, and there should be political decisions on that, so that as NRM will show that we have zero tolerance to corruption and that we are denying people services on the meager resources of the revenue. Part of the reasons why people are not comfortable, I heard about my colleagues talking about the variance between the revenue collection and the actual and the current discrepancy between the budgets of 72 trillion and then the 31. One reason why Ugandans are uncomfortable about paying taxes is the utilization of those taxes. We live in the community, you feel pain to pay tax, and then you see that you are in pothole of roads, that there's no services in the hospital, that the school fees, I mean, people are not children. They see, they realize that their taxes are not meeting the value for money. And at the end of the day, we pay the price, because we are the ones that look for the vote for the NRM to take power. So for me, that's one thing, the national address, I would like the president to delete. The paragraph on corruption should be deleted, and so that there is action.
Thank you for that.
And on environment.
Thank you for that blunt submission. Let's get to the environment.
On the environment, I come from Mbale, and in our sub-region, we've suffered mudslides occasioned by the degradation of the land and the deforestation of our community. And of course, like Professor Sarah has said, we have had a growing population, which is not in tandem with the resources. Of course, land is a constant factor. And therefore, we should be mindful to balance the growth of the population and the resources that should be able to harness to survive. And rightly so, today's International Day celebrations or marking of the International Day on the Environment having taken place in Sinonko district, in my Merito village in Mafudu, was useful and helpful to, like an awakening call for us to be able to learn how to reforest our community. But government must come up with very aggressive interventions to ensure that when you're telling people to leave the wetlands where people are growing rice to survive, or people to come from the mountains and the rocks where people grow for time immemorial. That's why they grow food with bamboo shoots, which we call malaya, is grown in those hills. When you tell them to come down, there must be alternatives, either to urbanize settlements, planned settlements, urbanization, but also giving alternative livelihoods beyond farming food, so that we can do the afforestation and restore the environment. Environment affects, the climate change affects us. There is a time, I think in April, June, where we had the unusual heat. Everybody was, people got headaches. It became so hot. Those timings of very unusual heat affects all of us. And they can cause food insecurity. Because the moment there is unusual bad weather, like Honorable Dombo has said, then you don't have productivity. Then the crops don't yield. Then you have food shortage. And Uganda's the biggest survival, even now, when we talk about some things and people are able to survive, it's because we are still a food basket. We survive on food. Countries like Kenya and our other neighboring neighbors, they don't have the food we have. So for them, even they rationed food, and even prices. When I was in Kenya in 2017, one of the biggest campaign issue was the price of posho. A government almost collapsed because of the price of posho, which does not happen in Uganda. Okay. So climate change is a very, very serious matter. It can actually affect the existence of governance and can cause insecurity. Let me conclude by this. In Uganda, we no longer have insecurity of guns or insecurity of fights. But our biggest threats are issues of poverty, youth unemployment, and to secure food for everybody, and household incomes. Those are the real threats that we need to deal with, away from the other threats. So we must be mindful of these things, and that's why I'm very strong about issues of service delivery and utilization of resources that we have.
Thank you very much, Honorable Wanyoto. Dr. Sarah, yours will be a twofold question. If we are to go by functions, this State of the Nation's address could be a cacique to the wedding of the elections. Because come a year from now, we'll be closer to nomination and all these things. When you look at the political climate, when you look in hindsight at our politics and election season that has been, every time the violence has escalated. Also, my second question is about these sanctions as a country. What does that mean for us? But also when you look at the political climate, is this something the president should address, especially to create confidence in the population about the forthcoming elections in 2026?
Let me first briefly add my voice to Honorable Wanyoto's voice on corruption. Honorable Wanyoto made a wonderful submission. You asked Honorable Dombo on whether the president can walk the talk, and as you asked, I was like, okay, so the president has been talking about corruption for 38 years with no tangible action. We have institutions, we have a few trials here and there. The common talk is the small fish versus the big fish. It's only during Chogam when we saw the first trial of 3 ministers. Of course, there was Gavi Fund and then Chogam. These trials of ministers, so the ministers were directed to step aside before they were tried. During the Gavi trial, they were even dropped in a cabinet reshuffle before trial. During Chogam, they all stepped aside before taking plea at the anti-corruption court. Come 2023-24, you have ministers. The biggest scandal involving many ministers, 22, the Iron Sheet scandal. And also the issue of stealing from the poorest of our community, the Karamojong. So we saw all the ministers staying in the comfort of their offices, lead car, throwing citizens off roads as they move with their convoys. Investigations happened. Ministers are tried in court. Ministers leave the dock for criminal charges, not civil, and come and sit in cabinet. There was double speak by government spokespersons. There is no law requiring people to step aside. And you're like, come on, it's common sense. And where the law does not exist, then follow your own precedents. During cabinet, there was a presidential directive for ministers to step aside 2 weeks before the trial began. But the same government now is giving, gibberish to citizens, saying there is no law requiring ministers to leave office. You have ministers. A minister is facing corruption charges, is requesting for a passport to go and represent a country to negotiate for financial commitments, financial obligations. I think the world looks at us really as a big joke. Even after reshuffle, one of the ministers, still from the dock to cabinet. And this is the president going to lecture citizens tomorrow about gays. Gays cannot control this country. Come on, the issue is corruption. Stop diverting us with gay talk. You have a speaker. Before the show, I ran a quick, Google search. If a speaker, any speaker of any country has ever been under international sanctions. And ChatGPT was funny, saying, people occupy such offices, of, caliber that shouldn't attract sanctions. They are not of questionable character. But here we are, and then they said the honorary speaker is a Ugandan speaker. So we've made history as a country that we have a head of an arm of government under sanctions. And those sanctions are for corruption. They are not for AHA, like we shall be diverted, or like people want to divert this country. I know there were visa bans after passing of AHA, and the reason for sanctioning was clear. People's visas were revoked, others were told not to apply to visit some countries, and the reason was clear: Anti-Homosexuality Act. The mover of the motion was among those. Now we have sanctions resulting from petty corruption, stealing from the needy, but also significant corruption in the leadership of parliament. That diversion of AHA should stop, because the reason for sanctioning are clear. So you have the recent talk at Matters saying gays are not going to control this country. I think we should take responsibility. So the question then, as I conclude on this, can the president walk that talk? Talking for 38 years, in 2019, the president walked. So you have the talk and the walk by the president in regards to corruption are disjointed. So I don't know whether he can walk that talk. He talks or he walks. Okay, he does not walk that talk.
Now can he bite? Since you have said he can talk and walk, now can he bite?
I don't know. So coming to the questions you asked me, again now I've talked a bit on sanctions. Sanctions are a vote of no confidence. 3 reasons for which Ugandan officials are being sanctioned: petty corruption from the poor, Mabati ish saga, significant corruption in the leadership of parliament, and abuse of human rights. So the question then that citizens out there would ask is, are these things true or false? We also the stealing of Mabati. We have seen abuse of human rights. General was sanctioned for massacre in Kasese. Did it happen or not? Is it fiction or not? It is not fiction. Many people died in Kasese. There is no accountability. We have seen other acts of abuse, gross abuse of human rights. Both the UK and the US have indicated that there are more sanctions coming. We have seen abuse of human rights in this country. No accountability. Significant corruption in the leadership of parliament. We see, the parliament, financial matters are supposed to be handled by the commission of parliament. The leader of opposition says the commission never sits. He has not seen any meeting of the commission as the leader of opposition. But decisions are taken, including yesterday, there was a donation of 50 million by parliament. There was, now parliament is going to sit in per region. So if parliament goes to Gulu, the per diems of staff, the per diems of MPs, the movement, everybody, who has taken that decision? Has the parliament leadership or commission, has it been reduced to an individual who even has no vote according to the rules of procedure? So you have a person whose role is supposed to be chair, but that person is the commission, is the alpha and omega. If that is not abuse, then what it is? In case anybody is blind to other issues. When you look at elections and the season we are going into, we have 1 year to nominations. Parties are attempting to prepare their memberships. NRM started with the registration of members and said, shocked the country with the 18 million members. And so we started checking data from UBOS, whether we have that number. In the last elections, we had almost the same number of voters. When you estimate people from 18 years, 16, 17, who are likely to be 18 years in January 2026, we come up with a total of 26.1 million. And I know that you both will give us the accurate figures after census. So you have NRM saying out of the anticipated 26 million voters, we have already taken 18 in their registration. I don't know whether that is true, or if it's a preparation, you know, a mental game to prepare citizens for possible rigging of elections. One of the two must be the reason. You have other opposition parties whose activities are affected by police. NUP does 1 or 2 events, then they are halted, then they come to police, and then the other parties are in factions. DP has 2 or 3 factions, FDC has 2 factions, UPC has about 3 factions, and the other parties that are doing their work, some of them non-functional. Parties are affected by 2 things in this country: limited resources and violence, state-instigated violence. Why do I say state-instigated violence? There is always contestation between the police, the army, and the activities of opposition political parties, not NRM.
As you conclude.
As I conclude, the terrain, the climate, the political climate is really neither here nor there. Speaking from the civil society perspective, we have been discussing, because there is absence of civic education, we should have now be at the climax of civic education, voter education in preparation for elections. But if you look across board, there is almost no civic education going on. There is no voter education. Civil society, we are trying to discuss, because some of us are registered to work on elections. But the last elections, we were arrested doing work that we are licensed to do, doing work that we were accredited to do, and there is no accountability. So if I'm accredited by Electoral Commission to observe elections, but I'm also a registered entity with elections as one of the thematic groups, and as I do my work, I'm arrested. I'm not taken to court. There is no explanation. There is no accountability. How do I re-engage? So we are struggling with questions of how do we re-engage, and in the absence of civil society, nobody else is doing voter and civic education to prepare the citizens.
Thank you.
That spells doom for elections.
Thank you very much. We hope we get a silver lining to that doom. Honorable Mara, when we look at oil and gas,
Yes.
something that the president has been thumb-chesting, the first drop of oil is probably going to come next year, according to some of the reports we have seen. Is this going to be the game changer? And is this one of the things the president needs to emphasize, especially at a 72 trillion budget?
Thank you, Timothy. As I had already indicated, that when I saw the agenda coming with a 14 trillion shillings additional on the budget, and knowing what I know in terms of our revenue collection, and I would just say, where are we going to get the rest of the money? At a collection at 31. And then you could see that the debt rollovers and domestic refinancing going up to jumping from around a range of around 11, 12 to 19 trillion. And our debt repayments jumping from 21 to 34. So you can only be sure that the president must be having information that many of us are not privy to. And that now speaks to, it does speak to oil. Because, Timothy and viewers, that oil is projected to give us, with the royalties, we've done the numbers, to give us $2 billion annually. So at the current exchange rate, that is almost about 7.5, 7.6 trillion. And that, in effect, can help you with your debt rollovers. It's an addition, you know. So instead of going domestically to borrow, you can pay off your debt rollovers using that oil. So then your fiscal space is widened so that the next financial year you have more money to use. So I believe that because we have invested a lot of money in this budget also, there's money that we have given to UNOC for our interest in the investment in Albertine region. We have invested money in ECOP. We have given our capital equity investments there. So things are moving in tandem in terms of what is happening in the oil and gas sector. The question now is, are we in a position to have that oil come out by September 2025? That's the big question. Because I remember sometime last year, the Minister of Energy, Ruth Nakabirwa, said the CPU, which is actually a central processing unit, which is in Kabale, was still at 33%. So I am optimistic that oil will have it will be a big contributor towards our budget support.
But Honorable.
And the sooner it happens, the better. Because the debt sustainability, now you just look at it, Dr. Sarah, with a budget of 72 trillion, 34 is going towards debt servicing. It's not a very comfortable position.
No, Honorable, I have a small question
please.
for you. I know that the budget was exaggerated, 72, just to take advantage of the 3%, so that the state can use the 3%, unlimited funding and it's bigger money. But there is no other reason that makes sense apart from that. So you say oil is projected to come out in September 2025.
Yes.
Still it would be outside the 72 trillion budget, because this is June to June, June to May.
Yeah, it will still be outside. But remember, we are going to go domestically to borrow almost 19 trillion. So we are going to borrow money domestically.
And
so be ready.
And deprive the private sector.
Absolutely. So we are going to get that money from the private, from banks here, the big banks here.
So
we're going to get that money. So maybe now 2025, 2026, now that cushion then will start coming. So you can borrow now knowing that in the preceding year, you're going to have a cushion. And I think the president is smelling the coffee, which many of us are not seeing. I think he's a recipient of so many information.
Are we still within the fiscal charter?
Thank you, Honorable.
I think we are still within the fiscal charter because we projected, the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility is a 5-year, number. And we are going to go up to 56 on debt to GDP and come back to below 50. So we still have a window to accommodate it. I think on corruption, let me say something quickly. I think we lost our moral compass on corruption a long time ago. I don't know what can be done to really reverse the trend. I have always said that the president is a recipient of intelligence information. I believe the president knows who the corrupt people in Uganda are. And there are mechanisms in place to really get to the corrupt. Unless something is drastically done, I think the talk about, I agree with my honorable, that speeches won't do it.
Action.
If he can't take action, then he can delete it. I want to agree with you, because why the citizenry is very angry outside there is because they hear us, the politicians and the leaders, we talk about corruption and we don't do anything about it.
Thank you, Honorable. Let me bring in Professor. Professor, corruption is one of those things we discuss day in, day out. Countries like China have made it very expensive. How do we make it something that is a no-go area? How do we make it very expensive? But also, my other question to you is, the president has talked about agro-industrialization, something you hinted on, value addition. It can be the difference between the $2.5 billion we get as countries in Africa to the $460 billion market of coffee in there. How do we play in that space of value addition and industrialization to the benefit of the lowest Ugandan there?
Yes, thank you very much, Timothy. The first question you asked me about corruption and what we could do about it. I think part of the reason, I know my neighbor said we lost the war, is also I think we lost the focus. It's the focus that I think the problem is we have all chosen to focus at the top, but condone corruption in the different layers and spaces we occupy. Actually, I used to think there was a lot of corruption at the top until I went to local and I saw the level, the monies may not be much, but the level of bullying and corruption and exploitation at local level makes one believe that actually decentralization should be disbanded. The reason we decentralized was that we were taking services closer to the people. So these people would see what is right or wrong and make noise about it, other than having only the center, which was very far from where services were taking place. Honorable Lydia Wanyoto has explained what happens there, and you wonder, what are all those people doing? Okay? But those people are ready to come together when there's a land grab, to deprive people of money. They sit on those council meetings and divide the money, and they do all that. So as long as we condone or allow corruption to occur in the small spaces we occupy, there's little the top can do about it, because the top has this limited reach. But what we can do is to say, how do we safeguard those who report corruption at the local level? Because it's extremely risky to take on corrupt guys at the local level. They can actually exterminate you without you having much to do about it. And that's why I'm not one of those who will ridicule the IGG when they go local. I know we are all saying they're going after small fish and leaving big fish, but the small fish are simply too many, and those are the things which inconvenience our lives every day. The police is extracting this, the magistrate has made your file disappear. Your land was passing here, suddenly it's passing here, the LOC is at it, the LOC 5 is dividing. I know of a district where tires for a tractor were bought at a very exorbitant price, and the first day the tractor went through the community, all the trees were off. So you have that occurring every day. And it goes into the ethnic problem where people think, we decentralized eating. It is our turn. So you want to have our son arrested so that you bring hood there. So I think the burden of corruption should be carried by each and every Ugandan. And until we do something about it, nothing much will be done about it. And I will give an example. When there used to be a mayor in New York called Rudy Giuliano. And I know he has had his issues thereafter. But at least when he was a mayor of New York, he just didn't go for the big fish. He started by having zero tolerance to petty crime, because New York was very violent at the time. And he was, whether you just went for graffiti, he took you on. He was able to reduce the crime rate in New York by 50%. And then, of course, thereafter, there were processes of gentrifying areas and upgrading very poor areas. So I think whichever way we start, we should do something. And I remember last year, Spire Sentong and his team tried actually to run an exhibition on the CSOs. I know we've tried to do an exhibition on Parliament, and we're all up in arms. But he tried to do an NGO exhibition, or was it a CSO exhibition? And there was uproar, because also that sector is not safe. And that's why they were reporting about the hunter being hunted, and suddenly they all denounced that exhibition. And it didn't last for a very long time. So that shows us that it is a cancer. It concerns all of us. It's true, we should ask those who are responsible and have been mandated to do something about it, to do something about it. But if we only focus at the top and we leave the cancer to grow at the periphery, actually it becomes normalized, it becomes a way of life. Children are going to come from that area to the top, looking for more opportunities to be corrupt. So whether the IGG has started from the periphery, whether whichever office is dealing with the periphery, let them deal with it. Because that will, if you can make it extremely risky for those levels to engage in that, then we reduce the swamp, and then you can focus where they are. But of course, it's important that those who are mandated do something about it. Then the other question was on agro-industrialization and how the lowest people should be helped to participate in it. I think for me, one of the ways to actually do this and do it well is to give people the infrastructure for value addition. And I'm happy about PDM, about Emyoga, about whatever has put money in people's pockets. But all of you here know that the biggest cry we're having from villages now is food. And they call you in Kampala, send some food. You can no longer buy food. There's a food crisis. And there are periods when villages experience famine. Okay? Why? Because all they farmed was either sold off for those who are lucky, or it got rotten and they threw it away. Okay, if you have maize, you might dry the maize and somehow the trucks will buy it. If you have tomatoes and you've grown tomatoes, then you'll have no one there to buy the tomatoes. And that's why you go in one season, you buy lots of tomatoes, you come back, people say, that's the heap, they all got rotten. So we have an issue of, first of all, for the rural people to be party and benefit from this agro-industrialization move, we need to give them the basic infrastructure to add value, and especially to preserve, to improve the value of their commodities so that they stop being simply perishables. The other thing is to organize markets for them. And shortly, that's what I want to say, that's what the cooperative movement in the past did. The cooperative movements provided extension services. Markets, they provided farmer inputs of good quality. They monitored production. Farming and production. They monitored the processing. So if you had coffee, you were not allowed to just put it down because for you have chosen in your compound. You're going to grind it there.
Standards.
There were standards. Yes, thank you. They put standards, and from there they also provided a market. So someone observed this value chain. We disbanded cooperatives, and then what did we do? Everyone to themselves, and God for us all, the state will safeguard security. And now, instead of going back to that model, we are putting money directly in people's pockets. Of course, it's the same liberal model. For me, if I want to dry my things on the ground, I don't want to, if you've given me money, I've chosen to drink it. As long as I pay back, really no one cares. So that model will not help the poor people to come into the monetized economy. We have to have a process where their goods can get into a monetized economy so that they benefit from that, then they will pay taxes, then the country will collect more revenue, other than simply give them money and let them decide what to do with it.
Thank you, Professor. Let me read some feedback coming through. Thank you, Timothy. I like the way Professor Sarah has analyzed the issue of PDM, where they're talking about transforming of lives, but actually, on the ground, there is nothing that has been transformed in people's lives. This is Mugabe Godfrey from Bugweri district. Okay, this is lengthy, but I'll pick a few things here. Listening to both Honorable Dombo and Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, it is becoming difficult for them to express some of those things. Museveni cannot do anything about corruption. This is a fact that needs to be dealt with. It's just hot air. Be smart, only pay your taxes, all your taxes, and ensure that everything happens, okay? Thank you very much for the message. Timothy, thank you very much for the show. This is Daniel Okrut from Mbalwa, Boyogere. The President's address last year promised to ensure that low inflation as a foundation for economic stability, establishing more manufacturing plants, intensifying PDM. He goes on and talks about 2023. The President's address said 5 years, the financial year 2024-2025, for the next 3 years, the economy will grow from between 6.5 to 7%. Yes, that's true. Okay. Timothy, thank you for the show. I want to be able to talk about a few issues. Progressive development of the state. We need a total overhaul of the nation. Fresh foundation, reinstate term limits, age limits, reduce the districts from 100 plus to 60, reduce the size of parliament by half, increase the budget of fundamental areas. Okay. I also like what Honorable Lydia Wanyoto has said. I like the way she discussed corruption and the emphasis on its tendencies there. This is Moses Enyat from Tororo. Finally, thank you for the show. Okay. Thank you for the tough questions. With corruption, Dr. I think it's Honorable Mara, the data from UBOS showed us that during COVID, ironically, the economy grew. The statistics were so abstract. This is Benjamin from Kampala. A lot of messages coming through. Thank you for the messages. I want to thank my guests. Professor, thank you. Honorable Mara, thank you very much. Dr. Sarah, always thank you. Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, thank you very much.
If you allow me 1 minute, I want to respond to the issue of NGOs that Professor Sarah, talked in about the debate. NGOs, go through rigorous scrutiny with their partners. After the so-called exhibition of NGOs, NGO Forum, our platform, invited the public with complaints about NGOs, including the exhibitors, to bring evidence. Nobody brought evidence.
Okay.
We went ahead individually and invited our partners to do audits. Nothing. And we are going on with our work. There was no evidence on that.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dombo, thank you for coming through. For clarity, the State of the Nation's address is tomorrow, the 6th.
Should watch.
No, actually, sorry, it's today at 2 p.m. So please keep your eyes here at UBC. We'll be bringing it to you live from Kololo there. But we'll end with this quote. The axe forgets, but the tree always remembers. Good morning.
PDM, changing lives.
Is the one that's pressuring the world to get with its own program, its anti-Russian program, anti-multipolarity program. And this is what, forums like the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum are intended to oppose. Cooperation within the multipolar world based on win-win cooperation, mutual respect, something that, according to the Russian president, the West just does not like.
While Vladimir Putin spoke on the sidelines of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, we've been hearing from the head of the Indian Center for Promotion of International Initiatives, who highlighted the importance of cooperation within the BRICS group of nations.
Of course, now here around more than 140 countries, as we have seen the statistics online, are here. And the main aim here is to develop much more strong cooperation between our countries to develop and promote the multipolar world. And when we are talking about the cooperation, it's into the different aspects and different spheres. For example, like trade cooperation, cultural cooperation, education, tourism, like that. BRICS is now one of the most important organizations globally, because if you see from the year 2009, when it was started only with 4-country BRIC, and now it's officially 10 countries, BRICS plus. And already this year, Russia is holding the presidency of BRICS chairmanship. So around more than 50 countries have already shown the interest to participate this year in the summit. Why? Because BRICS is the only group globally which is playing the most important role to promote strong cooperation between all the friendly countries. For politics, you cannot ignore trade relations. Trade and business is very much important. The economy, GDP for the country is very much important. You can see India as a big example for the world. Now we are in the world top 5 economy, India. So we never thought about sanctions, what is happening with Russia. What we believe in making strong cooperation, strong relation between the countries, and we need to do that is beneficial for the citizens of our countries, that is useful for the growth of our countries.
Let's head to East Jerusalem now, where tensions have been running high between Israelis and Palestinians. The third holiest site in Islam, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, has been stormed by Israeli settlers. Now, this came during a provocative parade that celebrates Israel's capture and the occupation of East Jerusalem and its holy sites in the 1967 war. RT's Middle East Bureau Chief Maria Fanoshna reports on this for us.
Well, I am in front of the Damascus Gate leading to Jerusalem Old City's Muslim quarter, where a big number of Israelis holding national flag have just arrived celebrating what they call Jerusalem Day. Indeed, thousands of Israeli police forces have been deployed inside the Old City and outside. Many roads leading to this place have been cordoned off to avoid clashes, and police is here here to provide security, and even journalists have been separated from the mob by this fence, so we cannot go any closer, but we can clearly hear them chanting and singing. So what is actually happening? Well, today Israel marks 57 years since the part of Jerusalem I am currently in, the eastern one, has unified with the West. Well, this is how Israel looks at it, celebrating Jerusalem Day annually with a parade. While many believe this is a provocative and controversial celebration as it marks Israel's capture and occupation of East Jerusalem and its holy sites in the 1967 war, a move that is not internationally recognized. Thousands of Israelis carrying their national flags are currently marching here to Damascus Gate, and again, some of them are already here. The entrance leading to the old city's Muslim quarter to continue through the area predominantly populated by Arabs, and for many of them, of course, this parade is like a red rag before the bull. They see the celebration illegitimate and nationalist. The main parade hasn't reached the old city yet, but things indeed started boiling up in the old city already. Clashes broke out between Jews and Arabs as residents of Arab quarter braced themselves for the right-wing flag march. Reports say that an Arab journalist was harassed there by Jewish settlers while he was covering the event. The footage we receive apparently shows the moment when Jewish youngsters knocked the journalist's phone out of his hand, and sounds of a fighting follow. We also receive a video of Israeli settlers performing a provocative dance traditional for Jerusalem Day inside the old city again, in front of Arab population there. So it is getting hot again. Thousands of police forces have been deployed here, and they will try to provide security. Every year Jerusalem Day witnesses clashes between Jews and Arabs, and it is different this year, of course, as like 57 years ago, Israel is at war again, and Arabs strongly opposes Israel's military offensive in the Gaza Strip, which gives an extra reason for anger tensions for them. And so forces are here again, as it may go wild any moment. Earlier, Israel's national security minister, known for his extreme right-wing views and strongly anti-Palestinian agenda, threatened to storm the old city's Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest place for every Muslim during this Jerusalem Day celebrations.
We need to hit them in the most important place for them. Every year they said that it was not appropriate and it was not the time, but the opposite is true. If we give ground to them, we get an October 7th. We will march through the Damascus Gate and rise to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, no matter what they think and despite their anger.
Hamas has already announced this Wednesday a day of rage and called on Palestinians in Jerusalem and the West Bank to confront Israelis. We also have brought our protective gear here in anticipation of clashes. Meanwhile, several kilometers away from here, they will soon start a different type of protest, of gathering. Thousands are expected in Tel Aviv to demand the government to bring 124 hostages back home. Now it seems that a deal between Israel and Hamas is closer than before. Last Friday, as you remember, President Joe Biden unveiled a three-stage plan according to which Israel would be able to return its hostages in return to a ceasefire, pull out of its troops from Gaza, and the reconstruction of the Strip. At a second stage of this plan, there will be, it is expected that there will be a permanent ceasefire, so the end of the war. But many in Israel don't believe this will actually happen. Hamas announced early on Wednesday that it welcomes the proposal promising the ceasefire and the end of the fighting in the Gaza Strip, and that it now waits for Israel's response, and we all are waiting too.
Now let's head to the heart of the Palestinian enclave, where an Israeli drone strike has claimed several lives in Gaza City. Just a warning, there are disturbing images ahead. Well, this video captures the first moments after that attack, and dead bodies, as you can see, lying on the streets, while the wounded were taken to a nearby hospital. Now, according to reports, an IDF drone fired at least 2 missiles at the location. To date, over 36,500 Palestinians have been killed since the start of the Israeli offense in October. Well, local media reports suggest that there are no more operational hospitals in Rafah. There is a field hospital that you can see in this video, which was supposed to be the last active medical facility. It's currently being moved to Deir al-Balal. Amid the dire conditions in Gaza, its health ministry has called on the international community and humanitarian organisations to deploy more facilities and medical teams to cope with the crisis.
Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital is the only hospital providing health services to more than 1 million people currently, and its clinical capacity cannot bear to receive more martyrs and injuries in light of this serious aggression against civilians, children and women. The numbers of wounded and patients in the hospital's departments exceed the natural clinical capacity by more than 3 times.
Well, we discussed the health crisis in Gaza with the communications officer for the International Committee of the Red Cross, Hisham Mahana. He says that the ICRC is still providing medical services in Rafah despite the dangers and the challenges.
The International Committee of the Red Cross team remains in Rafah. Our team exists in the field hospital that the ICRC established last month. We continue to provide urgently needed healthcare services. We are also expanding our outreach to support the remaining functional hospitals and healthcare facilities across southern Gaza Strip. We have recently, just a few hours ago, delivered a medical shipment that includes urgently needed medical supplies, disposables. We call it war wounded kits. It includes materials that are used to treat previously injured people, estimated in dozens. It was delivered a few hours ago, as I mentioned, to Al-Aqsa Hospital, which serves nearly 1 million people in the middle area, the very area that has been witnessing very extremely intensified situation. We can hear explosions and exchange of fire all the time from different areas, from all sides in the middle area. The same situation in Rafah. I believe the main challenge is survival, how to survive, how to spend the day and the night and witness the next morning amidst intensified hostilities everywhere, tanks, shellings, airstrikes, exchange of fire from, in the vicinity from where they exist, besides the hardships of accessing to sufficient amounts of food for their families, for their babies, for the sick and patients, and also have access to clean water, both for drinking and for cleaning. I believe that they also are challenged with access to healthcare services that they need on a timely basis.
Washington's policies towards the world are guided by colonialism. That's according to Russia's top diplomat speaking during his first ever visit to Burkina Faso. Sergei Lavrov said in comparison, Moscow is seeking equality and mutual benefits when it comes to cooperation with other nations.
Americans still cannot get rid of their syndrome of almightiness and permissiveness and think they have the right to make claims all over the world, telling African, Asian, Latin American, European countries what to do in economics, politics and how they'll cooperate with the United States against anyone deemed a competitor by Washington. And they divide all foreign affairs into those who are for the United States and against the US. This is none of our concern. Our relations with African friends develop exclusively on the basis of mutual interest and equal treatment. The West is still playing zero-sum games. It still can't comprehend the idea of equal cooperation. It is still sick with all the bacilli of colonialism and neo-colonialism that drive it in relations with the global majority, and these relations are still a way for them to live at the expense of others.
Well, on his diplomatic tour of Africa, the Russian foreign minister is now in Chad. Earlier, he'd visited republics of Guinea and Congo. In Burkina Faso, there were agreements that were made for Moscow to supply military equipment to the nation, with Russian military instructors also aiding local forces to combat terrorism. Moscow will also invest in the mining and agricultural industry and offer humanitarian help in the spheres with that. Well, we've been speaking to the former assistant of the Ugandan president, who says Moscow's approach is different than the West's, and that is helping to open doors.
Yeah, I think the Russian foreign minister is not far away from the truth. If there is a country from Africa that has a smaller internal problem, which should be managed internally. For example, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Guinea, where they have had, in Niger, where they have had some internal government change. Most of these government changes, yes, military, but they have been peaceful. But see what the United States has done, rushing in quickly to impose sanctions and so forth. Look at the United Nations, rather United States' relations with the rest of the countries in Africa. They have imposed sanctions on South Sudan for a very long time, sanctions on Zimbabwe for a very long time, on Libya for a very long time. So the approach of the United States, the policy of the United States, especially towards Africa, is a neo-colonial policy. There is no recognition of the sovereignty of the African countries at the moment, in my opinion. Russia's relationship with most of African countries is very cordial because Russia does not meddle in the internal affairs of the African countries. Russia does not come in to dictate what laws the African governments should pass and what laws governments should not pass. So Russia is coming into Africa, and there are so many opportunities for cooperation between Russia and Africa.
Slovakia's Prime Minister has made his very first public address since he was shot 5 times point blank in an assassination attempt just last month. Robert Fico claimed the reason he was targeted is because no one's allowed to have different views in Europe anymore.
The situation in the relations between my political representation and partners in the EU and NATO escalated after the Russian attack on Ukraine, when we refused to provide Ukraine with any military aid from state stocks except for humanitarian aid, and where we continue to fundamentally prefer peace to war. It is precisely the conflict in Ukraine that the EU and NATO has elevated even more, literally sanctified the concept of the single correct opinion, namely that the war in Ukraine must continue at any cost in order to weaken the Russian Federation. Anyone who does not identify with this single mandatory opinion is immediately labelled as a Russian agent and politically marginalised internationally. It is a cruel observation, but the right to a different opinion has ceased to exist in the EU.
Well, first of all, Robert Fico, I got to say that for a man who was nearly killed less than a month ago, he looks absolutely fantastic and very healthy, and looks like he's got a commanding language as well, body language, and as well as speech. So thankfully, the perpetrator in that case was not successful. Just a reminder, on the 15th of May, 71-year-old Yuri Chintula, a Slovak local, shot Robert Fico several times in his torso, and the man was on the verge of death, basically. He was rushed to the hospital. We all saw that footage of helicopters, of cars rushing out, and it was done in plain daylight. Now he's